Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Startup Sales. Really excited for this week. We've got Morgan Williams with us, and for those of you who don't know Morgan, he's very active in this startup community, but he's actually an expert on B2B cold outreach. So today we're going to speak a lot about how to get your outreach campaign set up, what are some good numbers, and how to make it work for you so that you could get more conversations. So it's going to be a really terrific episode, and let's get to today's episode.
Startup Sales is a podcast about what it's really like to get a business off the ground. We talk with founders, CEOs, and sales VPs from the high-tech market. You'll learn how to build and scale a sales team. You'll also hear about the growth challenges and tough decisions from others who have had both successes and failures. And now, your host of the Startup Sales Podcast, Adam Springer.
Morgan, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you doing, Adam?
Very good. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here. So can you give everybody that's listening a little bit of a rundown about who you are and where your expertise comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in sales my whole life, everything from, working in retail when I was younger in high school. I even worked at McDonald's, telemarketing in college, right? Working at Macy's. But after college, professionally, I started, and after a short stint in law school, I started out in outbound sales, working for logistics companies. It was heavy cold calling, 80 to 100 calls a day, all 1 or 2 call closes. Did that for a few years and was able to build up a lot of sales acumen by getting a lot of touches over the phone and learning more about selling to people. Knew I wanted to get into technology, so I got the opportunity to work at a cybersecurity company in sales. And this was back in 2016. It was a lot different than what I was doing before. Longer sales cycle, dealing with a complex organization with multiple decision makers at different levels. And instead of just primarily phone, I was using email, right? And throughout this process and for a few years being in sales, I started to really get interested in what made people say yes when it came to on the phone, via email, and learning more about sales psychology and like what it really takes to get meetings with people. And through that, learning process and discovery, I found out that, the ability to turn a list into meetings and then customers was one of the most coveted skills you could have in sales, or one of the best assets that a business have is a solid outbound sales process, particularly with being able to use cold outreach and getting in front of people. So went over to did some consulting, then went over to another tech company where I am now selling advertising, and I continue to podcast and write some blog posts and do interviews like these.
All right, terrific. What do you like better, the cold calling or cold emailing? First of all, do you like cold calling?
No, I don't. I don't think that anyone really likes it. It can be very rewarding, but when you first get started doing it, you think like, man, when is this going to stop sucking? Or when is it like, when am I going to enjoy this? Or when is that fear going to go away? And the answer is it gets smaller, but it never really goes away. It just is what it is. Yeah.
So do you find what's better and more productive, the cold calling or the emailing?
So I would say, and this was, after doing a lot of research and just trying things out on my own, and hearing, what's better, cold calling, email, or, several other channels. And really this might be kind of like cheating an answer, but it's really a combination. I've found that like one of the best things is using email to get several touches in, right? Email and other channels, and then following that up with a call so that they have some context to you. And doing that in a very specific way is very impactful when it comes to getting someone's attention. So like, I know your audience likes actionable insights, so I'll share one with that specifically. One of the best ways to get meetings is when you're doing cold email, whether if it's automated or manual. As soon as someone responds, look at their email signature, get their phone number, call them immediately, and book the meeting
Interesting.
from there. Yeah. Rather than responding via email and then kind of going through back and forth. I don't do it all the time, but when I do it and someone picks up, it works because they know who you are. They just read the email, they just responded, and you're ready to go.
I think it's so important to respond quickly to the
Yeah,
person. So I love that idea. Like, oh, an email came in, just pick up the phone, call, and
absolutely.
also like psychologically for you as a salesperson, it probably is a lot easier the less you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. You can definitely, talk yourself into different scenarios and whatever, and talk yourself out of it very quickly. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. So we could go off into two different ways here that I want to talk about with you.
Sure.
One is the what does a cadence look like? What does the format like? Do I send two emails and then a call and then two more emails? And then what are the rules of the emails?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I talk about manual versus automated first because that kind of
Okay.
changes it up a little bit. So let's start with like manual. And the reason you do manual is if you have a higher value customer, or you're dealing with a complex organization, but doing things in this manual way, it works really well for me. So typically when someone sets up a cold email campaign, what they'll do is like, okay, I want to talk to, let's say like, in my old job at cybersecurity, I was, emailing people on the security team. So CISOs, CTOs, CIOs, director of technology, that sort of thing. So usually what people do is like, okay, let's say I want to talk to director of technology. So I'll have these companies up and I will find the director of technology at each company and I'll email something, or email them something, or email them a cadence, right? But what I found is that when you're doing manual emailing to like a company with a hierarchy like that, the best thing to do is get a referral into the correct person, preferably from someone who is above them. So instead of emailing several people with this title, usually what I'll do is I'll email somebody. If I say I want to email a director or get in touch with the director, I'll email a VP, a C level person, and then someone lateral on that chain as well. So you're emailing four people total, and everybody's above that person that you want to email. And what you're looking to get is, employees cover their asses, and executives and senior leadership, they defer. As soon as they get an email, they're looking to who can I, or not defer, but who can I delegate something for? Who can I delegate this email
Yeah.
to? So think about it. It's much easier to get a response from, someone who tells their boss to look into something rather than emailing them directly, right? So what happens is I'll send a quick email, and I'll go into that content, but I send an email in a specific way, the same email to that hierarchy, all within, as quickly as I can. And then when that referral person responds, like either speak to so-and-so, I will reply to that email. I will change the subject line to, like, I'll keep the RE since they replied to me, but then I'll put referral from that person, i.e. their boss. And I will say, your boss thought it would make, or their name, but your boss thought it would make sense for us to talk. Let me know how your calendar looks. And I'll also kind of put like C below. Your boss thought it would make sense for us to talk, and in parentheses, C below. Let me know how your calendar
Mm.
looks. That's it. They can scroll down and see what their boss actually said, like talk to this person. So
Yeah.
they have that. I don't have to say like I emailed them and he said that. None of that. Just that simple sentence. Keep it vague, and most often they'll respond positively, and typically with scheduling information. I'm free, so and so. I'm free then. So that's how I do manual emailing.
I like how
Utilization.
you're going up and then working your way down, where a lot of people will go down and try to work their way up, which is an uphill battle.
It's much easier to
Just
flow downstream. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
All right. I love that. So what So let's go into the automated section
Sure.
then.
Sure.
How does that work?
So with automated emails, let's talk about at a high level the cadence, right? And I can take some information from a particular like case study I wrote off of some email sequence that I put together. So another thing when it comes to emailing people or cold outreach that I see the mistake people made, right? First, we talked about choosing your prospects, right, correctly. So now let's talk about frequency. So a lot of times I talk to people and they'll say, cold emailing doesn't work for me. It hasn't worked for me. I'm like, okay, what did you do? I'm like, well, I emailed, 20 people and nobody responded. So already it's like 20, that's not enough. How many times did you email them? Always it's 1 or 2 times, right? That's nowhere near enough. So like when you're doing a cold email campaign, it's really important that you have several touches, right? So for example, a standard cadence I'll use is instead of emailing someone 1 or 2 times, I'll email them 8 times in a span of 2 months. Keep the frequency closer in the beginning and then expand it out further as we move along. It's never set it and forget it. So like, for example, if there's a holiday coming up, right, I'll pause it. A macro event like what's going on with coronavirus when that started, I wasn't following up so frequently in the beginning. I was just keeping it 1 a week, right? Because I know people, businesses are, there's a lot going on right now, especially the markets I was selling into. So you got to be cognizant of that and be smart about that. But really what you want to do is more touches and emailing more people. So at a high level, that's definitely what you want to do. And you will see your open rates and response rates and meeting book rates climb if you just stay consistent and deliver value.
Okay, and what are some examples of these open rates and response rates and lead rates?
Yeah, absolutely. So on a case study I put together that I have on my website, I got open rates of 53%, reply rates 24%. And high bounce rate 13%, but those were like the open, reply, and bounce metrics. I emailed 783 people, and emails sent 3,579 over that 8 week period, that 2-month period, in 5 different campaigns. So 5 different like email sets. So I was testing. I split it up by geo, and I was testing different things against each geo that I was emailing to, as well as different. I was emailing agencies. I was emailing non-agency type companies, and I was kind of like splitting it up that way. So one thing I would suggest for people getting started now, put personalizations is becoming increasingly important at getting people's attention now. I feel like several years ago, before the whole inbound craze with HubSpot, right? It was cold calling, and then it was like HubSpot inbound, like inbound made this huge push. And we kind of like got back to outbound, and automation became the next big thing. And now we're heading into personalization and even hyper personalization, which I'm still learning a lot more about and getting into. But the more care you put into that email, the better response you will typically get. It's just a trade-off of time, this quality versus quantity that you have to make, depending on several factors.
All right. So first of all, the 24% response rate is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that? You say it like so nonchalant.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like that response rate is not. It has way less to do about what I sent or my skill and ability. The most important piece when you're getting into cold outreach is the people you're sending to. Right. Before that, we got the technical piece, which is email deliverability, right? If it doesn't get into the inbox, it's not going to get seen. So, but like putting that aside, we're talking about the market. So for example, I was emailing, I was selling like a content creation services, right? When I was doing my own consulting. And I was the people I selected to email were agencies, right? These were people who are, I know for a fact that they're already buying what I'm selling, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot different than if you're selling something that, is your prospect doesn't frequently buy, or maybe it's something brand new that you have to educate them on. It's a lot different. I've done campaigns before and have not had reply rates that high. So
Yeah.
I think that has more to do with like the market was like I knew they were buying what I had, and I just kept following up with them.
Well, I think that's an extremely important aspect is you need to understand and know your buyer before you just start cold outreaching to everybody, which is a
Absolutely.
mistake a lot of people do.
Yeah. And I want to add too, those weren't all positive responses.
Of
Like,
course.
you have, if you're like a third are positive, another third are no, another third are, go to hell. Maybe
Yeah.
smaller or like literally go to hell, but you know what I mean? Not all those are positive. So it wasn't everybody was like, yeah, here's my credit card. Like it was not like that. So, but yeah, you can't get
What do you
people.
find is the normal like positive reply? Like, hey, this sounds interesting. Let's move on to the next level.
Depending on the quality, like depending on who you're emailing and the quality of the email you're sending. I mean, I would say a reply rate. I would say, I mean, if I got a 10% positive response rate, if I emailed 10, if I emailed, let's say if I emailed 100 people and I booked 10 meetings out of that 100, I'd be like, yeah, I could improve this, but I think that's good for a first go.
10% from the top down to the bottom to call. That's a good number.
Yeah, if I could get 10 meetings out of that 100, that would be good for me.
Okay.
For sure.
How long does it take you to set this up and because you're with that kind of response rate and that kind of that level of outbound, it doesn't sound like you're doing fully automated. Like, hey, let's reach out to 10,000 people. It looks like it sounds to me like you're targeting your list. Is that correct?
Yeah. So like for this case study in particular that I made, it was very targeted, right? I was going after mostly agency folks who were already buying what I was selling. It was automated, but the thing is, like, let's say if you're booking meetings, like a lot of times, like we all have this, fantasy doing cold outreach that we're going to email a bunch of people and they're all just going to book on our calendar. Here's my calendar link, book on it. But it just doesn't work like that. A lot of the time people are they'll have questions. They'll ask you specific things, about your service, how much is it? Who have you worked with? This and that. So when people respond, right, it's not over. You have to get them into your pipeline and then continue to follow up with them, right? So there was following up that I had to do manually after that. And a lot of the time people can get, can lose interested leads just because they haven't followed up quickly enough or they haven't followed up in the right way. So it's important to like get those into a CRM. I was using Pipedrive. CRM and Mailshake at the time, two great tools. And anytime someone replied to the Mailshake campaign, it became a little card like on the Kanban board of Pipedrive. And that way I could respond to them from there. Then I started to see that people would have the same questions. I could bucket my responses into a few different categories and template them because people would have, some of the same questions would keep presenting themselves. So I was able to use those templates in Pipedrive, reply, and then kind of like take it from there. But there's definitely some follow-up after, you just get this initial cold outreach going. The emails really to identify hand raisers, identify people who say, okay, I'm interested, or to get rid of people who aren't, right? Then it takes some sales acumen to actually follow up with these people and whatever you're trying to do,
I definitely agree. And you said something as well. It's just you replied to them quickly. I know we talked about this more at the beginning of the conversation,
Yeah.
but I see people that get an email like, "Well, I didn't know how to respond. I'm still thinking about how to respond," and it's like
Yeah.
it's 4 days ago.
Yeah, that's way too late. That's way too late because it gives there's also like a I believe there's a subconscious like subconsciously when you reply very late to someone, it just kind of sends the message like, this I already don't know that person. It's just another strike against you, right?
Yeah.
Whether if you respond quickly, it's like, okay, wow, this person's on top of it. Like, let me see what's going on here. But look, hey, I've done it. Nobody's perfect. I've lost people in the mix. I've, for, thought I sent an email was in draft. I've,
Oh
gotten
yeah.
tough questions and people I just couldn't get them back. So it happens. But that's just the way it is.
Absolutely. Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the game.
So, all right, let's talk about content.
Yeah.
The content that you put into the emails. I mean, the manual one that you went over on your approach of working your way from the top down is amazing. Do you do the same methodology when you're doing a more automated process?
Uh, yeah. So not exactly because I'll start with the manual one to give some context to the automated one. So in the manual outreach like that, it's pretty formulaic. So, and just to take a step back, in all my sales communication, whether if I'm building a script when I used to create cold call scripts or email, anything like that, I will follow the same process. Anyone who's looked into copywriting before sales copywriting will be familiar with the formula: attention, interest, desire, action, right? Grab that person's attention, get them interested in what you have to offer, get them to desire it, and then get them to take action. Like at a high level, I always think about that, and I'll even write AIDA before I type up an email, just to kind of get myself in that mode. So when I create that, the subject line's always the same: appropriate person, question mark. And really the goal with all this is to get them to read the next line and get them to take action. So my camera went off second. So what you want to do is I always start off with appropriate person, question mark. Then in the email, like what I'm looking to do is I'm not asking. I'll never ask someone for time in the first email. I'll never say like, hey, can you meet? Like I will never do that because it's important to get them in a conversation with you, get them to engage first, and then move on to asking for time based on the conversation. But in that content of that email, I'm simply looking for them to point me in the right direction. So asking for time is a big commitment, right? I simply want them to direct me to the right person, right? And that's how I can penetrate the organization, getting directed to the right person. So in that first line, I won't introduce myself. I don't do that because it's in the signature. You don't need to introduce yourself. I just say, hey, I'm looking for the person who handles blank. Can you direct me to this person? And forget the exact text, but that's what I'm doing in that first thing. In that first email, even in that, I want to capture that preview line. I want them to know, when the email comes up and they see that little preview text, that character string, I want them to know exactly what to do as quickly as possible. One of my old sales managers used to say, that's your oceanfront property. Like that is, don't, you just, if you write an email and you're like, my name is so-and-so with this company, you just ruin your oceanfront property. Yeah. Like use that real estate as best you can. So I'll use that and get them to immediately, if an executive sees that, they know, okay, marketing and advertising, boom, talk to this person, right? I want to keep it a little vague. After that, this goes more into where your company is in the market, but you want to talk about the value you provide in a very direct and easy to understand way. And if you, I'll tell a little story behind this, but to make it more applicable, but the more well-known your company is or I call it, the more brand equity your company has, the less you need to explain what you do, right?
Yeah.
And if you, so people listening to this show, if they're early stage, right? You don't even really want to talk about what you do. You want to talk about the problem you solve. Like, what problem do you solve? Unique problem do you solve for that person, or that company, but like that department? Like, what do you solve? A quick story on this: when I was working in cybersecurity, I was working for a managed security services company, and we sold a lot of like cloud-based security technology, like 70 different products and services, a lot of stuff. And I was selling to higher ed, really K through 12, but mostly higher ed. But we saw this web security product that we sold to mainly schools, keep the kids off of, bad stuff on the web. Pretty simple web filtering product. But even though we were more well known as a company, I found out we were getting our asses kicked by this like small company in California. And when I went to go look at their website, I saw that they were like perfectly positioned for K through 12 schools. But not only that, their messaging was not. We were talking about malware and about security and all these technical terms. They were talking about cybersecurity, or not cybersecurity. They were talking about preventing self-harm for children. They were talking about stopping cyberbullying. They were talking about reporting to the parents, like being able to send reports on student activity on the school's networks on a weekly basis, right? These administrators at these high schools, they don't care about malware. They don't care about any of that. They care about student safety, right? So that's just to like drive home, like the messaging is important, not what you do, but the problem you solve, right? So talk about the problem you solve. And on the other end, I interviewed someone who used to work at Google and sales, and I was like, so what was that like, selling on the Google team? He's like, well, when I cold called someone, they didn't hang up. Like, all he had to say was, hey, this is, so-and-so with Google. And I'd be like, okay. What's going on? Google's calling me. Okay.
The salesperson is waiting for the hang up.
Yeah, but they're like, okay, go ahead. Like, you always get time, when you got that brand equity. But so that's like the body, right? That interest and desire portion of it, right? And then the action. So in that initial email, it's a little bit different because I'm already asking them the question at the top with like, can you direct me to the right person? But what I'll do, really important, is I'll say, here's the value we provide, thanks. But then I'll put a PS, and I'll say, I also reached out to person 1, 2, and 3 in the same regard, right? And person 1, 2, and 3 are the people on the hierarchy that we were talking about in the beginning, right? Because what I want to do is I want to get email forwards going. I want to get people saying, hey, look into this. Do you know who this is? Like, what is this? Like, forward it over. And sometimes when you do this, you'll get a response from the person you wanted to talk to, or a response from someone you didn't know who actually handles the thing you're trying to talk about. And you'll see these forwards from other people. You'll see a forward, some people, they just go, question mark forward, to their employee, their direct report, so that's what you want to penetration. That's in that initial email. For subsequent emails. So for subsequent emails at a high level, I want to drive home one emotion to get someone to respond. And the biggest trigger that I found for getting people to respond is curiosity. Right. You need to get them. You're not looking like I said, I never ask for time before someone responds to me. I always want them to respond, because once they respond to me, I'm now in a different category than before. Now I'm engaged in a discussion. If you have someone who's maybe getting, tens of, 10, 20, 30 outreach emails from salespeople every day, every week, depending on who it is, maybe 100 a week. But once they respond to you, now they're different. You got the RE. Like, now you're in a conversation with them. So it's getting into that stack. It's like the junk mail. Like you take your mail home, you look through it over the trash can, you throw out the junk, and okay, now I'm going to pay attention to this stuff, that A pile. You want to stay out of the B pile and get in the A pile, right? What I'm trying to do is drive home one emotion. Curiosity is huge, just to get that response. But when I think about subsequent emails, a really good book to learn about this stuff too, really, Robert Cialdini's book Influence, when he talks about the 7 triggers of persuasion, or the 7, I forget how he calls it, but the 7 elements of persuasion, and cashvertising, cashvertising, like advertising, but cash in front. Those books are great. Yeah, that book is great. It talks about, in the very beginning, it talks about this concept called the Life Force 8, and then the 9 secondary wants. And the Life Force 8 is 8 things that humans need to, survive, to flourish, right? And the 9 secondary wants that are just like normal and natural, right? And the 9 secondary wants are things that are learned, right? As people are on the earth, right? They're not natural, but they learn them throughout their lives. So an example of the 9 secondary wants, curiosity, convenience, bargains, efficiency, right? And you look at sales copy, you'll see all this stuff. Great sales copy, it puts distance between where you are now and what you want, and it says, hey, you need this thing to close the gap, right? So I always try to have some element of that in my email, at a high level, in this amount of time we could remove this amount of pain, right? At a very high level, what we're thinking about. Social proof is a big one, and writing in a creative way, other companies you've worked with that are just like them and the problems that you solve. So you can have fun with that and play with that stuff, but as long as you're relevant and delivering value in a direct way over time, you will succeed with cold outreach, as long as your emails are getting to the inbox. So we went over a few different concepts, but the way to bring it all home is if you think about a pyramid, and you put one line at the bottom and then another line above it, so in 3 different layers. At the bottom is the market. That's the most important thing, is your target audience. How well do you know them? Timing when it comes to reaching out to them. Right? If someone's say you're reaching out to a startup and they were just funded, or right before they're funded, right? Timing, that market is the most important. Next is that message, your offer to that market, right? Like I was talking about that cybersecurity example, what you solve, how well are you able to, how good is your solution mapped to that market? What is your offering to that market, and is it something they really want? How can you position it as something you want? And next at the top is the copy, right? Whether you're sending an outreach video, whether you're sending a text message, which I suggest people do because they work really well. Cold email, LinkedIn, how good is the copy that you're writing to send them, right? And so you can see at each level, each one, is more important, or the one at the bottom is more important than the middle and the top. But that's how I think about it whenever I'm doing outreach and reaching out to people, or thinking about a campaign. I'll think about it in that format, and that helps me a lot.
Interesting. If I'm an early stage startup, or even a salesperson wanting to start with the outreach, where do I go to source the emails?
So I'm gonna assume that let me walk it back from what I do. So now I don't really start from a blank slate. I just have like a lot of stuff that I pull from. But let's say if you're an early stage startup that doesn't have that, I would really try to focus on, who your best customers are, and like really ask them, like, why did you pick us? You know what I mean? So I would really look to figure out, like, what was it about you that they love? Like, find your best customers and figure out, what was it about what you offered that they really loved. But let's say if you're fresh and you're just starting, and you don't have any customers. A lot of it comes down to testing and writing in that AIDA formula. I wouldn't suggest grabbing like well-known templates just like from the internet, unless you I wouldn't carbon copy them and send them, unless you like edit them down to be more specific and relevant to your audience. I wouldn't just grab something and send it. But I would really focus on writing conversationally. Like a lot of the stuff I send, it's like short. It looked like I when I write my subject lines, they might be all lowercase. A lot of times I'm trying to look like it came from a smartphone, or like it's just really personal. It was really just write how you talk. Like, I know that's kind of a generalized answer, but if you are, think about like a text message conversation. Like, I would really try to just write how you talk and layer in what you know about the problems you solve, your solutions, the customers you help, and start sending that to people. If you're doing it manually, like start with a small group and make it smaller groups so you can make it more personalized, and start doing that and getting responses from that.
That's terrific. All right, Morgan, I mean, there's a lot to take in here, and I think a lot of people are going to start running and starting to write some email copy for us. How can people reach out to you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. If you are a fan of podcasts or interview shows, which you probably are if you're watching this one, you can check out mine. It's called the B2B Sales Tech Podcast on just the major podcast platforms. Or if you have a question you'd like to send me, reach out to me at morgan@morgand, like David, Williams.com. So it's morgan@morgandwilliams.com.
Excellent. Morgan, thanks so much for joining us today, and it was a real pleasure.
Awesome. Had a great time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Startup Sales with Adam Springer. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Contact Adam about speaking engagements or consulting services at adam@startupsales.io.